Call this Altoona City Council work session to order Monday, May 24th. We'll now have a moment of silent prayer. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll open the floor for public comment now. If anybody would like to address council, you may do so by calling the number on your screen and giving your name and address when asked to do so. Okay, seeing none, we will close the floor for public comment and move into the first discussion item, which is economic development restaurant liquor license. And joining us tonight is John Haribnak from J.J. Hadley and Company Brewers. Welcome, John.
Hi there.
So do you want to start off by maybe telling council what it is that you're trying to do?
Sure. We're looking to
just tap it once.
Oh, thank you. In the and I'll start a little bit forward and go backwards. In the economic development license application, we need to seek and obtain municipal approval to bring basically an extra liquor license into the municipality. Same would happen if you were transferring outside from a municipality into the city. But generally what we're doing is using or trying to use a little known liquor license application, which basically means if we can bring a license into an area, show proof of economic development due to bringing that license in, and it's in an area that needs or is in the process of revitalization, we fit the criteria for that. And there's other significant criteria as well, but that's kind of the cliff notes on that. So basically, we're here just to see if we could seek that approval to continue that process.
What would you need from the city? Would you just need a resolution passed saying that council supports this?
Yeah, I believe the PLCB emailed out, which I can forward either yesterday or actually late Friday, a template from a city, I believe in Lewisburg, that recently passed one, and basically they said that's the blueprint. It's the resolution to allow a transfer in, and it had some other details in there.
John, I had the opportunity to chat with you, and I appreciate you taking your time to talk to me about this. And really, I think for most people, they'd be unaware of the problems of trying to obtain a liquor license. And you have an existing business, you have an existing license, but you're limited in what you can do. But this would allow you to basically expand the license and do what a regular R license is, my understanding, and those types of things. So I think it's a great thing for you and for the downtown and for our community. So I guess I would ask our solicitor, if we were to do a resolution endorsing this, do we need to wait till he makes application, or what will we need to do?
Well, the way I look at this is ultimately you're going to need PLCB approval on this. I would assume. I mean, PLCB seems to want to know everything when they're dealing with the liquor license.
Yeah, it's actually backwards. We're required to seek approval
Get the resolution first.
first, and then we can apply. I mean, I can have a lead behind.
Yeah, I do have a copy of the resolution. Councilman, I think we can draft a resolution for approval by council.
What's your time frame? Like, how quickly would you need that, John?
Ideally, 11 days prior to the end of the quarter.
So if we did it, well, we're in June because of
Yeah.
Flag Day. That's a,
Yeah, next meeting's Tuesday, June 15th.
oh, okay, so we would be,
I mean, I can have a resolution ready by then.
yeah.
Yeah, but
Would
don't
that-
we need the number? Like, I thought when we did these before, they'd usually be like a special meeting where somebody comes and says, okay, it's coming from here. Like,
That's on a transfer.
does the
This
exit
is on an
municipal-
existing,
Oh,
that's on an
okay.
existing
Yeah.
license transferring to another premises, and you have to have a
Yeah.
public hearing on that.
This is creating one that doesn't
This is
exist.
a brand-new license, so it's a difference. So what we would need is an endorsement from the municipality saying that we support this. And I'm guessing then that the LCB wants to see this before they would pass judgment on it. And then they've probably gotten burned or something where they've passed it and then a municipality says, boy, this is something we don't think is a good idea. And so that's probably why they want to see the endorsement by the local municipality with the application. So, I mean, again, as I said, I had the chance to talk to John, so I don't have any further questions and I support this. I don't know if anybody else.
I talked with John a couple of weeks ago, and I don't have any objection to it.
Yeah, I think I can have the resolution ready for the June meeting, and then it's on the agenda. And likewise, if anyone from the community has any comments regarding same, they can voice it during the course of the meeting.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with this. And John, I don't know if maybe you want to talk publicly about how hard and how much work was required, to do this, and about how you had to contact X amount of percentage of liquor license holders in the county to see if their applications were for sale.
Yeah, I can briefly go over some of that. I mean, first off, the interesting challenge in obtaining an open or openly available liquor license, that became very challenging within the last few years of convenience stores, supermarkets, and now big box stores being able to buy those, and they're buying the same license that I'm looking for. So in normal years, it's definitely not as high as it is right now. And if we look back at the few license auctions that have occurred, most of those in our surrounding communities even have been purchased by one of the corporate entities. So in order to get this license, we actually have to contact 75% of existing restaurant license holders and ask them if they are going to be or want to sell their license, which in itself is interesting. And that's really where I found out that a lot of these licenses are owned by big box entities, convenience stores, and even national chains. And when I got down to it, there was really not a lot of mom and pop restaurants that actually own these anymore. So that was very interesting, and I wasn't looking for that information, it just occurred. So that was the first thing, and then we have to contact 100% of any licenses in safekeeping. So that's something before we hit the send button, we still have to check for in case there's any additional ones that popped up that day. Reach out to them and see if they're for sale. Some are, but with real estate only. And so those were the easier ones, and a few have sold out or let them expire. So yeah, it's not something with return phone calls, follow-ups. It's not a one-day process for sure. And getting transferred to a department when they have no idea what you're asking or why a single individual is asking a major corporation, would they be interested or any of their liquor licenses for sale. So that was another interesting task, but I learned a lot.
Yeah, and it for the public's benefit and perhaps even for the news media, that if you don't understand, I mean, it's a there's a quota system. Most of the areas are already over quota from when they established it years ago, so they're not granting new R licenses. People hang on to them because they are worth some significant money. When you talk about the situation now with, I'm sure the cost on those licenses have gone up greatly. There's different types of licenses, and it's specific as to what you're allowed to do. And so I think this is a good thing for the community. And I'm happy to support this.
Does anybody else have anything further?
No, I'm just interested in knowing how it works because this is the first time one of these has come.
Yeah, this has been around since 2000, and as far as I could research, there has never been an application for that. And I've probably watched it for about a year and a half as we're trying to progress through the different stages of meeting the qualifications. So this is definitely something I assume after, and if we have a successful run of this, I would probably get a phone call. You know, how can we look at this for a future thing, which I have no problem. I just see this as a way that underserved, revitalizing areas could use this in order to grow a block and then hopefully a community over time.
And-
So it could be very interesting.
And John, if you wouldn't mind, again, it just be for the public's consumption as well as the media, then what, the license that you currently have is what type of license for?
It's a brewery license, license G. And some of the items that we can't do with that, and it's based on restrictions, and I don't want to go too deep into it, but based on traveling throughout Europe with my younger sister years ago, we came up with a brunch menu, and because of we can't open before a certain time, we actually can't introduce that, and we've always wanted to do that. And so that was a big part of it. The second thing, which I didn't expect, we've had so many requests, multiple requests for after hours events, after Mishler theater events. And because of the timing of them closing, by the time people arrived, that we would have to start collecting drinks and escorting them out. So those two were probably the most focused events. But even something simple as the 4th of July race, we can't be open when the race is going on. And that's a big community support event. There's really not much open. But if we're at the start-finish line, even to be able to pass out water, it's interesting the rules that you have to follow to make sure that everything's black and white there. So just a lot of, there's not one reason specifically, there's multiple reasons.
Thank you.
Well, I'm sure you spent quite a bit of time on this, and I do want to first and foremost thank you and your family for your business being in Altoona, particularly downtown Altoona. And I'm a frequent flyer at Hadley's, and really appreciate the work that you folks do. So thanks.
Hopefully only bigger and better to come. There's a lot of good stuff happening downtown, so everyone's doing a great job down there.
Yeah, you guys do a good job. The food is excellent too. Well, I've learned a lot. Yeah, I didn't know about the different licenses. I know we pretty much handle what have we been handling, like the R licenses that have to be transferred, but or the G licenses. But this is like our first one.
You mostly are. You have, there's still probably a couple old H licenses around, but a lot of those have changed for hotel. So
what's G?
that's for the brewery. Yeah.
Okay. And R is okay.
Yeah, and then you have like private catering clubs and those types of licenses too. So,
Interesting.
yeah. And they all have different criteria, and they all have different rules that they have to go by, and yeah.
How about we just cancel the state and just
Well,
do it that way? Sure would make things a lot less expensive and a lot easier to just.
All right, well, if nobody else has anything further, thank you for showing up tonight, and we'll work on that for our June meeting.
thank you.
All All right, moving on to our second item, housing, and joining us is Steve Mcknight, President and CEO of Altoona Blair County Development Corporation. Welcome, Steve.
There we go. It's great to be here. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. Councilman Kelly, I'm not sure if you wanted to lead this. I know that we've had some previous conversations about housing opportunity in Altoona and how things have evolved over the last few years with a few major housing projects in the city, and we're all looking forward. We want to see all of that continue, as housing is a critical part of our economic development strategy and our talent attraction strategies. We're bringing folks in, and a lot of times they find themselves without the right kind of housing to land in.
And it's not just an Altoona issue. One of the things I learned 2 years ago is that housing for Blair County is a problem, and you see that, and you just alluded to that with the fact of, you know, trying to attract businesses and adequate housing stock. But certainly Altoona, at least in the county, is unique because we are largely a municipality that's built out. There's very little developable land left available. I think I asked Omar if he could take a look at that, and some of that area probably needs some serious infrastructure to be able to build anything in it. Running water and sewer and putting some roads in it, some considerable expense. You know, we did have some success with houses down in East Juniata area, and that was part of a program where they even had some tax abatement for that going in. But we don't have a lot of ground that we can use. We have older housing stock. Most of it predates World War II. We have a problem where with an aging population, people have homes and they start to run into the problem of, if I do these renovations or things I'd like to do to the house, am I going to get my money back out of it? But as I said, we had success down in East Juniata with that project. We are now seeing, particularly in one area where, you know, that 55 plus market is obviously very attractive, and there's some adaptive reuses of buildings where might have been industrial before or retail before, and we're seeing some housing go in there, and that's been successful, but there are challenges with that. And you know, so what can we do to try to keep that going? And you know, how do we put our best foot forward and say, well, this is what we can offer? And so reached out to you because I remember you were part of the consulting group, and you led the presentation on this when we were in Act 47 about ahead of the curve with the housing strategy. And I thought it's you know, time to go back and what can we do to try to keep things going?
Yeah, and I appreciate all those comments. And yes, we are in a unique situation where we do have a foundational strategy in place. In the study that I was able to contribute to, lots of folks were working that project. But 2013 it was completed, and if you read it, it's still applicable today. I mean, it's held its value in terms of the predictive nature, the data analysis, and the trend line, and as well tracking some of the projects that it suggested be done in the project, you know, in the study. We've seen some of that come to fruition, and we see some other projects that are in the pipeline that this study identified prime adaptive reuse buildings for housing mixed use outcomes. So, you know, from the perspective of the Altoona Blair County Development Corporation in the economic development perspective, I mean, what we've been doing is in partnership with all the municipalities that would govern whatever the project opportunity may be, is what I call simple blocking and tackling. We need private developers to step up to the table and do these projects, find an opportunity to reuse a building, build new housing, and that has to be led by the private sector, especially for the market rate professional development, professional housing that we're looking to do. So encouraging those folks to get to the table leads us directly to what needs to be done. And so what I did was, some of that is contained in the original study, But I also provided a supplemental piece just for this meeting and a takeaway, because I know we don't have a lot of time. And on that document at the upper part, you'll see the 1, 2, 3. So those are still applicable today. They still have, a significant priority opportunity here. Site and building acquisition, preparation, developing the sites, getting them ready for a private developer to come into. We have now the land bank that's in place, that council had led the efforts there, and I know Mayor Pacifico, that was a project that was dear to his own personal interest to see that come to fruition, and we have that in place now. So we have some tools that we did not have several years ago to allow for some of that to take place. Priority area identification is simply, okay, where are the sites and buildings going to make the largest amount of impact and value and marketability for purchase or lease. And I know a couple of years ago we started the effort with the urban redevelopment area efforts, and that's something that could still, I know it was sidetracked with the COVID situation last year, but we're hoping that that would be a part of a discussion moving forward. And then the third one is the private capital stack, and making sure there's funding available that can be patient enough to incentivize a developer to come in, take the little bit of the risk out of it, allow it to be paid back as either properties are sold or leased up, and then when you have a fund that would revolve back into these projects. So those are the three pillars, that really define how a lot of the third-class cities and other underutilized areas within third-class cities especially, have to do it, or what they need to help those private developers to jump into those projects. And then I also provided a couple model projects that have taken place in the last few years for your reference, and then projects that are in development right now that we expect will cross the finish line here in the next year or so, and then some imagery, which is always, I think that's the kind of thing that keeps us focused. You can see some pictures that are the types of design outcomes that would be suitable for the types of infill projects.
The dream.
Yes. Got to have the vision, you got to have that illustration to sort of guide the thinking so we don't get lost in the words of a document all the time. Ultimately, it's better to work backwards from, I'd like that to be built there, and then you can figure out, how to do it.
Doing it. I guess when you look at your 3 points, the first question I would have then is, understand the concept, but what kind of dollars do you think, that's an important thing, is to what would it cost to put some of this together? I mean, we have a land bank, but they don't have any money.
Right.
And, I think it's a great opportunity for us to save some things, turn some things around with that, but they need some money. Now, we may have the opportunity to give them some money, but what's the figure, for that and these other 2 items?
Yeah, the numbers, and these are all sort of estimates based on, what would be available at any given point in time. But if you wanted to have a sustainable land bank and a revolving loan fund, you would be talking in excess of $3 million to really make us, a longer term impact because of the nature of these acquisitions and the remediation that may or may not need to be done on a certain site. So it's not a small undertaking. And if you do have an opportunity through the American Rescue Plan dollars, which of course is a one-shot deal, and we know it's coming in. I mean, I would always look at it through the lens of you have the guidelines that are associated with that, but then you also have the desire to see that make a long-term impact and be sustainable, and not just something that we spend and we don't see it again. These are areas in which, if the guidelines would permit that type of use, these are good ways to develop those investment pools.
The nice thing about that, though, Steve, is the 3 words revolving loan fund, which means it's going to get paid back. So if we put
Right.
money into that, the concept is it's going to get paid back in, so we can do the next project and the next project
Right.
and keep going forward with that.
Yeah, and the change in tax base, you know, when you look at underutilized or blighted properties, which a lot of these target areas, I'm sure that, you know, when we look at those, it would fall into, you're elevating the tax base, so you're also then producing a longer-term return, and a higher value for the properties that, you know, than they currently sit. So you're constantly, housing is a good investment. You know, it's a good way for municipalities to attract talent, spending, change the value of the tax base, create the next project, and move on, you know, time over time. But you know, you often think, you know, we're out trying to attract businesses and investment into the area, but I always say, you know, what's a business? Business or people? People are families. People need a place to live. So if you end up not having that type of housing that can bring folks in to make the investment, to open up the businesses, you know, it oftentimes starts there. So housing is a real fundamental part of the whole economic development strategy, not just here, but communities we're competing against, you know, across the country.
I look at, you know, I would call this the Cliff Notes version, right? And when I look at page 3 on this with the smaller footprint models, you know, and maybe this is a question more for staff, but do we know, you know, we've got some ground, but it's in the floodplain. And so we're kind of hands tied there. Do we know if you put townhouses there, if the living area was above the floodplain? Because there's many examples where it's basement or garage on the first level and you go up to the living area in these townhomes. I think of the Shipoke area of Harrisburg, which was devastated back in the flood in 72 or 73 and was wiped out, and they rebuilt in there with townhomes where you pull your car in underneath and it's, you know, not supposed to be living area. The first, you go up to the first floor in the living area. I mean, is that still something that can be done?
Yeah. Yeah, we do that. Jane does a really good job of that. She's a certified floodplain manager, and so having one on staff, we're actually one of the better municipalities of that for building in a floodplain, because as long as you design it and you're properly above the base flood elevation.
So I'm not just making that up.
No,
And that's
no,
accurate.
no,
that if
you're
living,
spot on. You're absolutely spot on, because some municipalities will completely say, nope, it's in a floodplain, you're not allowed to do anything. But municipalities like the city of Altoona and some others in the Blair County and surrounding counties, you can work with your CFM and actually do some excellent building projects, and one of those municipalities is us. So
as long as the
well.
first floor is not you can't live there essentially on the first floor, but upstairs is fine then.
Well, it depends, because the whole situation with the floodplain is, what is that base flood elevation for that area
Right.
that you're going to build? And so if you're X amount above that,
Okay.
you're okay. And as long as your design is proper, which in the city we have folks that can really do a good job in helping people develop those, as they've been doing over the years. Nate's department really does a good job at that.
and Steve, I'm going to put you on the spot. I hope you don't mind.
Please.
But, so, your page 2, visualization of potential change. What are your thoughts? I mean, that would require, you know, you have a picture that could be any place in the city of Altoona pretty much,
Right.
in a lot of different neighborhoods. And then you show the transformation to that. I mean, do you think that that's a viable possibility? And, you know, should we look at something that bold?
Absolutely. I think that representative footprints, you know, or sites within the city, you know, obviously if you have fewer currently owned houses or properties, or if you have willing participants to sell the properties and get them, you know, into a developable project, you know, those are easier. The fewer you have of currently owned properties, the better. But it's a lot of blocking and tackling. It's a lot of, talking to folks and trying to determine, what the model is. We've seen lots of models where if you're looking at the picture that we're showing, it's the changes from 4 houses to probably 20, 21 types of townhomes that are a little bit higher, a little bit more narrow. But you can negotiate residences moving from one house that's going to be demolished into one of the newer townhomes. And so there's lots of different ways in which you could negotiate depending on where the site and the footprint was in order to move the property owner's willingness to participate in the project if you're in a situation like the one the image that we're looking at. But this is really just representative of how many units you could fit onto a city block in a modern way, in a marketable way.
That's the challenge. Yeah, and there are very few situations in Altoona where you can do, you guys really did a very good job in the area of Elizabeth Apartments, Silk Mill, Greystone. But for the most part, it's very hard to find an area in Altoona where you have more than spot blight.
Right.
Our former planning director, Larry Carter, would always refer to it as measles.
Mm-hmm.
Like a little one here, a little one here. Because even if you went into what you would consider perhaps the worst area, every block has 2 or 3 really nice houses on it. And maybe there's a blighted house here, a blighted house there. So it's not like you have an area to go in and work with. So it creates a challenge. Like your point number 2 there, priority area identification. That's a little tougher in our city because we don't have complete areas of blight.
Well, that's why I use the phrase about being bold.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we've never talked about that, and yet we know that there are some really high traffic areas in the city that may be attractive for business use or mixed residential use like this, like the pictures you're showing.
Yeah, that process it's a very important step. And as I said, prior to the pandemic, we were moving in a way which would have helped glean that mapping process out and begin to demonstrate where you have fewer broken teeth. So it's sort of okay, I think we could work here in this general area. It's a primary area. What does it look like? Begin to have discussions with the property owners to find out sort of where their willingness is, and move on from that point. Also, always have a conversation with the development community simultaneously about their interest in doing projects, because you don't want to wait too long. You want to bring them to the table right away and concurrently while you're having those upfront discussions.
You're in a unique position. You were part of this study that was done a few years back. You're now back in the community as the executive director of the economic development group for the community. Obviously, with the 3 items on the goals and putting some money towards that, what other obstacles do you see for Altoona in trying to move forward with some of this stuff?
I think some of the larger challenges is more psychological, in terms of, is the market there, and, are people really going to be able to afford the various rents or purchase prices that would probably be required, for these projects to be successful. And, again, if these projects are done in a measured way, we're not talking about 500 units, we're talking about tens of units, or tens of townhomes, in certain areas. The study proved that in this market, it's changing, and there are folks, leaving the labor force, and there's folks coming into the labor force, and that market demand, that churn, is where, you meet the demand for these kinds of projects. So a measured approach, meet the market, it can be done, but a lot of times that's psychological, and that's tough even when you're talking with the development community, because we don't do speculative development here. We do on-demand development. This would require a move into a bit of a speculative marketplace. That's why it was important that the Elizabeth Apartments, did that project. They did that project, and they went for the lease rates that targeted the professionals moving into the area or moving up in the area, and they met
Steve,
that.
I would argue that they would not be speculative projects moving forward, because we have enough
We have enough data to.
use case scenarios where there were
Yeah.
positive outcomes to show that there is market demand for market rate housing here.
You're absolutely right. The speculative is only a word that we use because we may not have a buyer in hand, but you may have 12 interested folks standing right there saying, when you build these.
If this would happen, then we'd jump on board. And, again, let's look at who's our largest employer. And, the opportunity to do some housing that would be near the hospital, I think would be pretty attractive for people.
It absolutely would be. I mean, I love, thinking bold and continuing to, put that, light out there for us to, go after. And again, it started many years ago that you've all been thinking about this. And again, this wasn't my idea. I came in with the study, but it was already a discussion that you've recognized that this needs to happen. So the data, it was great that the data supported it, and that we saw the pathway forward through the study process, and that has continued. And we just got to keep it rolling. We all took a year off, and now it's time to start really turning some dirt.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
Just for our own edification as well as the public that may be watching, let's talk broad stroke about your job and what housing means in trying to attract business and industry to the area. So, if you want to just kind of amplify on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll say it again. Talent is the major commodity in economic development, and it really always was. But now, given the fact that all types of other infrastructure are already in place, and it's expected that it's in place, the commodity that businesses need is human capital. How do you attract people? How do you bring people in? Now, the remote work dynamic, is going to help some of that. I don't think it's here. It's not going to stick across the board, but it does open up opportunities for some folks to engage talent in different ways that's outside of the community. But ultimately, we want to bring them in. We want folks to come in and move into the area. Aid in our demographic structure. We want to see our population grow. We want to see our tax base grow. And in order to do that, we have to transform the physical environment in which we're in and bring it also up to speed. So there's just, it's fundamental to the economic development efforts in attracting the people into the area. Just like John and J.J. Hadley's, why would economic developers, get into restaurants? Well, it's changing the environment. It's creating the place to live and work. That's the two that are symbiotic in what we do. So we need those kinds of things to create that place.
I think to dovetail off that COVID has kind of been an example of that, really, that you can almost, a lot of professions today, you can work for someone that may be somewhere, but you can live somewhere totally different. So if you have a community, and a housing community in particular, where you want to live, play, raise a family, that's kind of the market that we're going after. And to speak to the point earlier, not to quote Donald Rumsfeld, but this seems to be like the known unknown. As prior to the adequate housing coming into place with the Elizabeth apartments, we didn't know if we could get the base rate that we've been getting for premium housing with those apartments, and even Jeff Long's project. So I think there's still much demand there.
Absolutely believe it. And Councilman, that your point about the whole pandemic dynamic, is absolutely true. I mean, we stand to gain as much as we stand to lose, depending on who's where in the United States and why they would want to come.
I know a lot of people,
move in.
a lot of my friends that were from Blair County went to live in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Washington, D.C., that came home to Blair County, and they lived at home with mom and dad, and they worked from home, and
They're not leaving.
Well, and surveys had showed that with the pandemic, that the people who never had worked remote before now were working, like at least 30 to 40% of them now say, I don't want to go back into the office. I don't want to have the commute. I don't want to do this. And so if you can work in an area that has, low crime, good schools,
low taxes,
and taxes always tend to be the third rail. But if you talk to people who, live in the suburban Philly area, live in the, Pittsburgh area, and look at what their taxes are compared to ours. I mean, it's a bargain here, so.
Yeah, it's an opportunity, and again, these projects fit that pathway is where
Does this
out there
segue
reaching.
into a conversation about broadband at all?
It could.
Well, no, I mean, I think it does, because in not just attracting, future business, but also people look at that. That's an important infrastructure thing that businesses and individuals look at.
As much as Interstate 99 was a priority infrastructure project for us for years, and that project was years in the making. Broadband had a much steeper growth mode here, and it's an absolute necessity. I mean, as communities are being judged now, it's not do you have it, it's what kind do you have and how good is it.
Right.
And we all realize that, in our remote lives, last year, in our school life and all of that. If it absolutely, the investment needs to continue into broadband. I know there's an opportunity under the ARP to focus on broadband as well, and we're committed to making sure that that's a priority. But they do go hand in hand, Bruce. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and we're not just talking about buffering while you're trying to watch something on Netflix. I mean, this is about business and
Sure.
growth
And telehealth, these are between education, telehealth, and just simple remote work. It covers the core economic, stools to the stand there. It's really important.
I'm sitting here thinking, remembering back to when you gave the original report, and I'm really happy now what all has taken place since then. It feels a lot better
we have
now.
some examples,
Yeah,
and that was kind of what I've been looking at is we've had some really good things happen, and some things that we probably would have never thought would have happened. And how can we amplify that? And is there still more demand? Can we keep that going? Because again, it's about creating desirable housing options,
yeah.
places people want to live. And even, with Mr. Rivnak and that discussion about the license, I mean, I can remember having people come to town looking at things and being in our downtown and going, where are the people? So they want to see that foot
And it's a
traffic, they
lot
want to see some nightlife, and they want to
This
see
summer,
some things.
this summer will be a lot different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, I'm not talking about during the pandemic, I'm talking about
No,
years ago,
right,
where-
but just in general.
Yeah. So,
Well,
we've-
our organization is committed to this. It's part of our strategic plan, and we've always been a partner to the city, at every level. And so you can continue to count on us to be here to address city council, and then also just work
well,
on
we're
the
we're
ground.
going to need some help. I
Yep.
mean, and it's kind of a matter of, we're, in trying to digest the elephant, where do you start? You're not going to do it all in one bite.
Yep.
And it's going to take not only rolling up some sleeves, but it's going to take some seed money
Yep.
to help make these things happen. But again, when you say revolving loan fund, that's a good thing. That means that there's an initial outlay, but money's going to keep coming back in to help go with the next project then, so.
Any other questions or comments on the topic?
I think we're going to keep you all on speed dial,
Yeah,
Steve.
I think
Just-
you've got us. You know that.
Well.
We appreciate it.
And, I do think, though, we still need to talk about, and we had a little bit of this, council had a little bit of discussion about that, but that is, what can we do to incentivize and help the current homeowner who is thinking, if I do these renovations, if I do these repairs, will I ever get my money out of it, or should I just move someplace else? So how do we even go down so far as to get the individual homeowner to reinvest in their property? Because one of the things that people don't realize is that we still have a really high rate of home ownership in this town.
Mhm.
And last I checked, it's still like 60% or just a little bit above.
That's what's been saving
You
us.
know, and
Yep.
you compare that to some other communities in
Yep.
the state, you know, where it's much lower than that. So, you know, but people worry about putting that money in. And so, you know, some of it is education, I think, as you said, but we need to do some things to make sure that people that want to spend that money in fixing their house up don't face the dilemma of, do I do this or do I move out of town?
Right.
So,
That's a good point, because there's a direct correlation between percentage of home ownership and amount of blight.
Sure.
The higher that percentage of home ownership, the less blight. And so to incentivize that is certainly one of the priorities we want to look at.
Home ownership puts skin in the game.
Good job on these.
Good.
Really good.
I
Thanks,
mean, I
Steve.
didn't expect that we would like have light bulbs turn on and come out of here tonight and say, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I think we need to keep this discussion going.
Yeah. No,
mean,
I
This isn't a once and done
Yeah,
conversation.
I agree. Plus, you know, the projects that are listed there that we've been in the weeds on, you know, working with the developers and developing tax incentives and credits for, you know, anything we can do to, again, level that risk. We sometimes lose sight, you know, of the big picture, you know, that this is still happening, and we need to communicate that. And again, I think everyone's head has been in a different spot over the last, you know, so many months. But the time, you know, as we're coming out of this and we see, you know, what we think are some strong trajectory and the opportunity, just because of the movement in the market and the people in the market, you know, it's time to be bold.
Well, this is about investing in the community. This is really about attracting people who may not have looked at Altoona before to Altoona. It's about expanding the tax base on a very individual basis. But I think, again, you know, perhaps it is time to be a little bold about some things, so.
Good. Well, we're here and we appreciate the opportunity.
No, we thank you for
Yeah,
coming
thanks,
in.
Steve.
Thank you.
And you'll most likely be back.
Good. Always. Thanks.
All right, next item, small cell ordinance.
Okay, so the small cell ordinance, this was discussed a few meetings ago, and the takeaway from that was that everybody was interested in a small cell ordinance to somewhat regulate the facilities that are in the city. We already did have one. It was pigeonholed in zoning, and since zoning kind of took a backseat to everything else, I think we pulled it out. Went down the middle of the road as far as the regulatory side of things. So the ordinance that's in place right now, we just brought that in from somewhere else and got it into place. And so we kind of, after a few reviews, we went back through and tried to dovetail the ordinance to kind of reflect the procedure that we have based upon the personnel we have in-house right now. So that's really what the ordinance does. It provides for a more clear-cut process for an applicant. It allows for a 30-day posting on site so people know what's going on. It's allowed in all, the small cells are allowed in any zoning district. There is an appeals process in place through the Code Appeals Board if something doesn't seem to be kosher.
Did Dan Cohen, did he write this ordinance?
No. This is kind of a hybrid between what we wanted, what we found online as a model ordinance, and then working with Eads, who did some reviews of ones in the past. It correlates really about with what's in place right now at the federal level as far as what we're allowed to do. So it's not overly tasking. It kind of falls right in line with everything.
Mayor, what we found is what we currently have in place. It kind of needed to be modified and tweaked to really address these particular types of small cell applications. And we think, as Nate was saying, through that, those few initial review processes, what we're seeing with other places, it just made sense to pull these type of applications out of zoning, create a separate chapter to deal with it, because while there are some similarities with other like cellular applications, it's a little unique in and of itself. And I think by having its own separate chapter, based upon what we've learned with the initial few reviews, we just think this is more of a streamlined and more efficient process.
Will this change if the, if the legislature passes HB 1400, I don't know if it's still 1400 this session, but it was basically the small cell wireless bill that they were trying to pass, and there was the industry was trying to pass it, and there was a lot of pushback from municipal league and stuff like that. But there's been a compromise between that bill and the people that were opposed to it. So if that bill passes in Harrisburg, will we have to go back and redo this over again? Would it make sense to hold off until something happens in Harrisburg? Are we on a time clock where we have to have something like on the books now? You know what I mean? Is that why we're trying to get this passed?
I think we have something on the books right now, and Nate, you can jump in if I missay anything. I mean
something that complies with the new FCC stuff.
I think what we're finding is just what we have on the books may not be the most efficient way to process those applications to deal with them.
Yeah.
And we just felt this was a better process. To address your question, if the legislature, if Harrisburg eventually comes out with a new final statute, signed by the governor, and there's something in there which is contradictory to what we would put in this ordinance, we'd have to go back and amend, because that's going to, state statute's going to take precedent on it.
And that's always going to be the case.
We're going to have to
Yes.
go back anyway, because there's some things in here that may or may not, this is going to be a learning process. Like, I'm reading here that they can't be any closer than 150 feet away from each other. We may find that that's unhealthy and may need to change that to more distance at some point.
Well, I think that's one of the things that, going back to the original ordinance, there was some language in the zoning ordinance that said, you had to really give, you had to state why you had these things closer than 500 or 1,000 feet away from each other. And these
Yeah.
things work within 150 feet of each other. That's why they're called small cells. So there was some conflicting language that cleans this up. And you're right. I mean, we did stay away from that side of things, putting this together, because we really don't. It's in its infancy, really, I think. But I think, the word we got was we wanted to try to get something on the books to be fair to the resident, but also, allow for this technology to come in and capture it the best way that we could, with having insurance policies every year from the providers, having updated lists of the locations, because a lot of these companies, even though Verizon's a parent company, it's owned by a subsidiary of a subsidiary, and some of these things we chase all day long trying to find. In the past, on other types of things, when it involves like fiber on poles, that these things get sold and traded, and we just don't have a good understanding of it. So this kind of provides for some structure on that also.
Yeah.
As well as capturing the fees that we're allowed to capture, which isn't that great, but it keeps tabs on these folks when they're around, so we can go back and take care of business if we have to, if we're doing a road reconstruction or utility placement, something along those lines.
My concern would be like different providers sort of overlapping each other and creating a situation where we find out down the road it's unhealthy for the people that live within those overlaps.
And it's a good point. It really is. There is some language in here about co-location on existing poles and trying to play well with others, but who knows when it gets to that point if AT&T will play well with Verizon, or if they're there's a what do you call it, like a schedule of operations if you have to try this, and then if
Yeah.
you don't have that, then you go on an existing pole. If that doesn't happen, then you go on your own pole. So, and then it puts it under Public Works too, because it really does exist in the right of way. So, there are some other things in there as far as like electrical permit, building permit, but those were in the existing one
Right.
already, so. So I guess we're just asking, are we ready to push this thing out? It's kind of middle of the road vanilla, so just an update for you.
Okay. Do you want to move forward with it next month? Is that your plan? Do you want to?
I think as long as you all are
Okay.
okay with it, yes, I think it's something we need to do.
Well, it's
Alright.
better than
I'm
we
okay with
have.
Yeah.
It gives
It
you
cleans it up.
Yeah, and it helps the staff and you guys doing your job, and it'll need cleaned again eventually too. But if it helps you guys do your job better and it's a better document, I'm all for.
Streamlines the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Nate. Moving on to.
We will put that on the agenda then for introduction at the next meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll finalize that and get it on the agenda.
All right, thank you.
Mansion Park Allegheny Furnace Neighborhood Plan Stormwater Update. Nate, I assume that's you again.
So with us tonight, we have Dan Byer. He's an associate with Eads in Altoona. So over the last, I don't know, what do you think, Dan, about a year, we've been out the Baker Boulevard area, Mansion Boulevard. We've canvassed the entire area, I think 2 or 3 times. Thus far, we've captured all of the concerns I think that we've gotten between council members, the public, what gets called in, and the concerns and the conditions that we see present in that area. So a few years ago, I started to ask for a little bit of money to do some what I would call master or high-level planning, with the opportunity to put some plans together in neighborhoods and see how everything fits together, so that we could get some designs on the books and get these things shovel ready, or at least to the point we could, if we're moving ahead with infrastructure repairs, we could do that, or we could apply for grants or do other things. But so instead of the shotgun approach on the back of a napkin, we wanted to sort of look at this, get some public input along with it. So I think at this point, we're ready to sort of reveal the planning documents at a higher level and let you know that we're going to go outside and have a public meeting, but wanted to kind of share what we have to date to see if you all are happy with it. So I'll just, without further ado, let Dan do his thing. And
Thanks, Nate. I'm Dan Byer with the Eads Group. As Nate mentioned, this is for the Mansion Baker Boulevard Neighborhood Roadway Stormwater Improvements Project. These are conceptual drawings. They're for discussion, comments, likes, dislikes, as we go over the plans, and we can make modifications to them per your preferences. First slide goes over the overall conceptual plan, outlining Baker Boulevard, Mansion Boulevard, in between Logan Boulevard, State Route 36, along with the other streets such as Fort Robodeau, with the intersection modifications to make that a 90-degree entrance instead of the current configuration that's at that location. As we go along, these are just zoomed in areas with more detail. Looking at Baker Boulevard, the green area inside of both lanes, that would be for stormwater management improvements to address any of the current stormwater issues that are out there. And also like to meet with DEP to get credit for MS4 improvements with this project.
I have a question.
Yes.
If we do this, is there a possibility of getting some houses out of the floodplain?
So this work, currently what's proposed is the improvements to the roadway, the stormwater improvements, no improvements to sidewalk or outside of the right of way.
Okay.
This isn't going to change any of the flood elevations. It's just for the roadway improvements.
Okay.
Scrolling through here, these are additional drawings, more into detail. Going to go to the cross sections. So here's Baker Boulevard, showing the current roadway width at 18 feet, and we're narrowing it to 16 feet wide. One thing that does, that helps traffic calming in that area, and it also reduces the impervious area to add for credits with the MS4. And again, these are for discussion, likes or dislikes for narrowing that. And what's shown in the island area is the stormwater management facility, shown 6 feet on each side. So that's a stormwater improvements of total 12 feet for that width of Baker Boulevard. The other remaining streets, it would be roadway improvements and addressing any storm issues, not proposing to change the existing roadway widths on the remaining streets. On Mansion Boulevard, very similar to Baker Boulevard, would have a stormwater management upgrades showing the 12-foot widths in the center islands. And came up with a option 2, Baker Boulevard parking option, where there would be bump outs shown on the roadway. They would serve as dual purposes, traffic calming in the area, and also to provide for safer parking in the area. With this option, it shows going 2 feet towards the houses, so it keeps the existing roadway widths the same and providing the safer parking in the area. This is showing the cross section for Baker Boulevard with the additional parking area, and the parking would be on both sides of the street. And with this option, it's also showing the stormwater management improvements. One thing, it's very flat on Baker Boulevard. There's about a 1 foot grade difference. So by providing the stormwater management controls that we're showing now, we'd be able to accommodate that flatness out there and still be able to address the stormwater issues. That's the end of the slides. If there's any comments, suggestions, and if we need to go into further detail after the meeting, I'm glad to do that.
Well, I think full disclosure, there's 2 members of council, myself included, that live in the neighborhood, so I think I need to state that publicly. Now, I haven't been involved in any of the discussion of this, but I'm certainly familiar with the problems in the neighborhood, and I'd have to ask our chief of police and our fire chief, you know, how many times we've had to shut down Union Avenue because Mill Run comes out and floods Union Avenue. Now, does this address any of that?
What we're trying to do is work with PennDOT, and that's the reason why we have decided to sort of show that T intersection at the end of Fort Roberdeau, because PennDOT's coming through with a project, and we're trying to partner with them where they raise the profile up along where the guide rail is, where it always comes over there, to try to at least provide some relief. And they're planning on doing some drainage improvements along Union Avenue too. The issue is, one issue out there is when the creek comes up, the water doesn't drain
Right.
out of the entire area. But when it does blow its cookies, we're going to try to address that with some profile grades. And
Well,
PennDOT has
even where you turn off a Union onto Fort Roberdeau, that gets flooded.
Right,
It's
correct.
impassable. And, okay. You know, the other problem in that neighborhood is the existing storm drains just they don't have the capacity to handle the water.
Correct. At this point, this would address all those little small castings that everybody has to clean out themselves, or does their part to help, I guess.
Okay.
So it would be putting full-size drainage facilities in. And we're not quite sure. We're still trying to work through and talk to DEP because there may be some additional credits if we would dig up areas of Mansion Boulevard to create holding basins for water. We may be able to get some additional credits alongside, making improvements. But the marching orders I had from the past were let's worry curb to curb and not address the sidewalks out there. So, as we go through this, any drainage improvements, anything we do, the sidewalks at this point aren't going to be part of it. At least that's what's proposed right now.
But there's
that
no
could
curbing.
change.
There's no curbing anywhere in that neighborhood.
Correct, and it
Yeah,
would be
it's all
taking,
grounded.
we have about 8 inches to 10 inches of asphalt out there that we would be milling down and probably just putting back. It's just been built upon, so that we would be, part of this would be addressing that. But, some of the trees are gonna end up having to go because you're digging through root structures to put piping in, so, there may be some, so that's why we're sort of,
Well, that won't be popular.
well,
You
not
have
all
those-
of them,
all
but
those, no, but you have all those old sycamore trees
you're right.
out there that have been there
For
for
150
forever.
years.
Right,
yeah.
so it's something that we really have to be cognizant of, making improvements. What are we doing to the existing look of the area? So-
The other comment I would have is when PennDOT redid Logan Boulevard and limited the access, particularly through the Liswin neighborhood out onto Logan Boulevard. A lot of people use that as a cut through.
Yep.
And you can't do that now at Holmes and Whittier, I think, and I'm trying to think of some of the other intersections. But the traffic on Baker Boulevard probably picked up some
Yeah.
because now there was never a light at Logan and Baker. Now there's a traffic light there. And I think people who live on Baker Boulevard would tell you that they certainly feel there's more traffic. Now you're going to narrow the roadway. I was happy to hear about the bump outs for parking because that would be the first thing I think people would think of is you're narrowing the roadway and, if I park out on this, street, what's that going to be like? So,
Would the bump outs pertain to all of the homes listed or that reside on Baker, or what would that look like?
So we were showing them. Let's go back here.
I mean, I understand the thought process by narrowing the road, trying to reduce speed there as well.
Right. So on this slide, it shows bump outs going out into the road, and we can add additional bump outs to this area. And then it also shows some striped parking spaces, and we would keep those away from the driveway entrances, so there's avoiding accidents. And with the bump outs, would it show the road sloped? Like if you're looking at the cross section of Baker Boulevard, going to this section, it's sloped towards the center island. So there,
Mhm.
we are proposing 6-inch curbs along the parking lane. And then the road would be sloped towards the center grass-treed island. So all the stormwater would flow to the stormwater management facility in that island area.
Okay. And much like Councilman Kelly, I subsequently live in Allegheny Furnace and have not had any of the influence or discussion to this point, so this is all brand new for me. Thank you.
Nate, I just want to say thanks for your work on this because it's kind of cool to see it come this far to fruition because it was just a few years ago that you and I were going out to the neighborhood in Baker Boulevard and meeting with constituents over stormwater and flooding issues out there. So,
When we get those real heavy rains, it gets messy quickly.
And also today, this is only one of 3. We have Pleasant Valley and we also have Garden Heights as additional areas alongside this one that we just are flood prone areas that are on the radar to, be looked at also. So.
the scope of work though would be on Baker, Mansion, and part of Fort Roberdeau. Is that correct?
The scope really is the master plan, the way we see it, would be Union Avenue, Ward Avenue, Logan Avenue, and probably Crescent coming down through the top. So because it's so flat, we're trying to come up with a master plan of about 5 projects to take care of a lot of the areas. But if we mill down on Baker, if we decrease the running surface or the grade by 6 or 8 inches on Baker, we have to chase it out down Mansion because that's built up the same way. So it's kind of trying to piece of jigsaw puzzle together from, you know, this step to the A to B to C to D to take care of the entire area. So I think we're just kind of there now discussing, you know, going further. And we want to have a public meeting and try to capture some of, you know, the concerns that everybody has in that area also. And hopefully we can use that with our knowledge to, you know, further this thing along.
What, for Mr. Kibler's sake, because I know that once there's an article in tomorrow's paper about this, Councilman Ickes and my phone is going to start ringing from our neighbors. What, like, when would you look to do a public plans display, a public meeting to get input? Where are we in the time frame on some of these things?
Like to get input from, I guess, council members first to have an idea that, yeah, this is a good direction that we're going in. Finalize these prepare better conceptual plans after that meeting then, and then meet with the public to go over more additional concept plans if necessary to get some further input.
We were thinking no later than midsummer.
Okay, and in a perfect world, when would you look to actually do the project and execute it?
I'm somewhat aggressive, but I would think if we had funding, we would be looking at, depending on what maybe funding we have to do certain things, we may be able to use some rescue money to start this too. But I would like to think we could get one of the phases out next year for construction
Okay.
and then build off of that.
Okay.
When would you like to have comments from council back to you by?
A week or two,
Okay.
or stop in and see me, you know, one of
Well, I
the
mean,
two.
it needs to be addressed. There's
Yeah.
no doubt about that. When it rains, the streets become rivers, and because there's no curbing, I mean, it's just, I have video on my phone I can show you of the water running down some of the streets. I've seen it where the water came up out of Mill Run, as far as the flagpole at the intersection of Mansion and Fort Roberto. That's how far the water came up one time. It was that bad.
I believe it.
So, and there's actually some carp in Mill Run because there was some carp left on the street there when that happened, which was kind of shocking. And I mean, we just know that the stormwater is overtaxed out in there right now, and we've had the authority come out and do some pumping periodically.
Yep.
So,
I think it's a win-win project. I mean, obviously, not only for the neighborhood, but for the city as a whole, because it gives us credits for MS4 program.
and that's a good thing too.
Yeah.
That's a real good.
Yeah, that benefits everybody.
But we're not looking to do anything that would take away from the look of the islands on Baker and Mansion and that boulevard effect.
At this point, no.
Okay.
We have drainage that runs
That-
down the middle of the island, so we're just trying to make some recharge pits to try to help our credit situation, but no, the look would not change. There's a few trees that are very close to the edge of curb line on the inside, not down the center, but just sort of rogue trees here or there. A couple of those may end up having to go, but you know, the sycamores and that look won't change.
Okay.
That's a tough decision to make, but one thing about sycamores, it's a very heavy, wet wood, and as
Yep.
those trees get older and branches start falling, they're very dangerous.
But I've seen fewer limbs fall off the sycamore trees and more off the old maple trees
Yeah.
in
Yep.
that
Yeah, them
neighborhood. I'll
too.
be honest with you. That's,
Yeah,
you know, there were several of us where I am in the neighborhood that replaced and got rid of the old Norway maples and put Zelkovas in, which has been a big improvement. So,
it's nice to see a project like this in this neighborhood, because a lot of times we'll address neighborhoods that are CDBG eligible, and a lot of the other city neighborhoods like this one get forsaken. So we need to start with projects like this doing a better job with some of the neighborhoods that aren't eligible for CDBG funding.
Anything else for Nate or Dan? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
for
Thank you,
being here.
gentlemen.
Yeah, good job.
Moving on to COVID guidelines. Omar, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I talked with Councilman Ickes. He brought up his desire to bring this up for discussion tonight. I think it's good timing. Just wanted to tell you that currently everyone entering a city building is required to have a mask. I can't tell you that always happens, but I can tell you that's what the signs on the door say. Also, all employees are supposed to be masked as it stands right now, and if they are unable to maintain adequate physical distancing of at least 6 feet. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the effect of COVID on the workforce. Since the beginning of the pandemic, about 25% of our employees have had a positive test. And that's just what we're aware of. We've been tracking this pretty well ever since the beginning. And about 37%, so that would be another 37% of the workforce has been impacted. In other words, they've had to quarantine or stay off work because of potential diagnosis or someone else they were living with. So I just wanted to share that information with you. I don't know if that's how that compares to any other workforce, but we do track that information on ours, and I wanted to share it with you folks. So I'll turn it over to Councilman Ickes for.
Well, thank you. I had sent an email shortly after the CDC's revised guidelines from, I believe it was sometime last week or maybe even the week before, that allows for masks to be removed for people that have been fully vaccinated when inside. And a couple of other things to kind of, one, I would like to see that take place for city employees. I'll put that out there, that if you've been fully vaccinated, you are able to, should you choose, you can take a mask off. The other thing would be for us to return to what I would refer to as a normal public meeting, which would be us gathered around the dais in a normal fashion for, I guess, the first 2 months that happened while I was on council, and allow public to come in to the facilities and participate, whether they're in person or if we want to leave the call-in option be an option as well. I think that that's something that's reasonable. And I would kind of go to this that, I mean, some data points. I know that the Commonwealth of PA is at about 50% vaccination for those that are eligible. I know that the governor is looking for 70%. I know that the CDC and the guidance from Tony Fauci have been kind of different, from anywhere from 60% to 85% to really, my opinion, depending on what audience he's speaking in, it seems to kind of be different. But I think for us to kind of reiterate some points would be, from my standpoint, that the public availability of the vaccine ends the emergency. You can get on an app, you can go to Walgreens, you can register today for a shot at any point tomorrow. And the reality just comes in is that the public availability of the vaccine is one thing, and if you want the shot, you can go get it. But to those that don't, we're probably not changing their minds. So how long do we go living in a state of perpetual social distancing and masking?
I'm in favor of it.
I'd like to see our meetings be open.
Yeah.
I still think it's important, though, that we allow for the phone-in option.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
those people who don't feel comfortable coming out, I think we need to continue to do that, as well as allowing for public comment live and in person. I guess I would ask a question of our solicitor regarding employees, and that is, can we make that optional? Does it become an HR matter?
I know we've been getting this question a lot, in our office, and what I'm seeing with a lot of employers is, if an employee produces, proof, hey, I'm vaccinated, they don't have to wear the mask. So I see a lot of employers providing that option.
And are we okay if we do this? So we would require them to show proof that they've been vaccinated.
That's what a lot of employers have been doing, because at this moment, the governor's mask mandate is still in place.
What if an employee doesn't want to show proof of that because of citing Hipaa regulations, or?
I think as an employer, given the current state of emergency has been issued by the governor recently, reissued again.
When does that? When is that up?
He just reissued it here.
Yeah,
Was it
it's-
last
it's-
week?
So it's another
It's like
21 days.
It's like a rolling edict.
Yeah.
Well, allegedly, after the 21 days now, he's going to be working with the legislature 15 months into an emergency. I'm not in favor of an employee having to show proof of vaccination.
You're asking me what do.
I understand.
What are
I'm
employers
just-
doing?
I'm-
That's
I'm
that's
just
what I've been saying.
And I'm not, Jesse, I'm not arguing that. I'm just worried about from a legal standpoint, from an HR standpoint, and that's, something, because we are an employer, and it's something
Right.
we do have to be concerned about. And I think this is, hearing discussion about this all across the country, it's a real concern for employers, is can you, places that are trying to mandate people getting the vaccine, particularly if it's a healthcare, employer, can they do that? Can they not do that? And, showing proof of the vaccination, does it violate, Hipaa?
I mean,
Does HIPAA apply to employers? I thought that was just for doctors and
yeah,
medical.
it depends. It depends if you become a holder of certain sensitive information, it can be applicable in certain instances. I mean, right now at this moment, you have an existing state of emergency order, you have an existing mask order. I'm comfortable with if an employer says, "Hey, show me you're vaccinated, then you don't have to wear the mask," because that's consistent with CDC guidelines. And if you don't want to produce it or whatever, I think as things currently stand, we can say then you're required to wear it. Now, if the state of emergency goes away or the mask order goes away, then that's different.
Right.
But again, that's up to you gentlemen as far as what you want to do.
That's in speaking in terms of employment.
Let's
What about
let,
an open meeting
Well,
like this? If we open up a meeting to the public and somebody comes in here,
Yeah, you're not going to be. I mean, once they came out with the CDC came out with what they came out. I mean, from a practical standpoint,
I'm not a doctor, obviously,
Yeah.
but I would imagine that there has to be some consideration that the CDC took, assuming that some people may not have their second dose and are walking around without a face mask on.
I'm not going to try to speculate as what the CDC's thinking or what they're doing. So
but are we opening ourselves up legally? Is all I would love to see it back to normal and have the public in here, but if somebody were to get sick, they came to a public meeting,
yeah, I mean, we'd still be given the option of you can attend and participate remotely.
And you can choose to wear a mask if you
Yeah.
wish.
So no.
That's a big thing.
our next meetings,
Really, the choice falls within the consumer. The risk falls within the own hat. If you don't feel comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And I can just tell you, since this all started, like everyone was worried about legal liability, a proof of a claim is exceedingly difficult.
oh my, yeah.
I would think that I would suggest that we allow for the opening up of the meetings.
Definitely.
We are allowing the opportunity for anyone who would like to share public comment. They have the opportunity to phone in. I think we should give the city manager the leeway to make the decision regarding the employees.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're encouraging, people to be safe, and if they've been vaccinated, to not have to show up wearing the mask all the time. But I think we let Omar.
Yeah.
Plus,
handle the
don't forget
details
the
of it.
gathering restrictions, they get further relaxed before our next meeting.
They go
so-
away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our
Mine's
next
0.
meeting's Tuesday, June 15th, so that's over the 21 days. So after that, the legislature has to step in and work together with the governor. And I also agree, let Omar and the department heads and their folks, do what they do.
Yeah, my understanding is as of June 1, the crowd limitations are
Well,
gone.
then I think
think
we
the only
we
the only-
open the meetings up with those provisos. Omar, you look like you were reaching for the mic button. Were you gonna?
No, I just wanted to clarify, it came up whether an employer is covered by HIPAA, and they absolutely are. I mean, you have to maintain certain, constraints on the classified health information of each employee and segregated and so forth, so that may become an issue if we asked for, somebody's vaccination proof. But I would look, before we make any change, I would look to for some guidance at the state level and find out what other
Are you-
municipalities are doing.
Oh, so or what about for the meetings? Are you
No,
comfortable?
That's fine with me.
All right, then, my thought is, we open the meetings up for our next meeting, and we let you handle the staff and the wearing of masks. But, know that we are encouraging that if it's appropriate, people, are not required to wear the mask if they're a city employee. So, and that's just me, so.
Oh, I've missed the opportunity for I enjoy.
Well, we're gonna have things coming up on the agenda,
Yeah.
like the American Rescue Plan monies and other things that I think it's important that we allow for public input. And I think that we need to get back to that as quickly as we can. So,
And people need to have the opportunity to voice their concerns in person or suggestions in person. And
yeah.
it's that time.
Do you want to continue the work sessions in this room as opposed to the training room, and also continue the public comment and the video of?
I think we should do it in
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then
Continue that part of it.
you can do the video of the work sessions, and you can't do it in there.
Right.
I think that's important.
Okay.
And we can move back to our original
And
seating. Or
It allows for more room, it allows for the video presentation, and again, it's easier for people that want to call in if there's a work session going on, so. Good catch.
Okay, moving on to American Rescue Plan.
Okay, so I notified council, late last week, we received our first 50% payment of our designated amount under the American Rescue Plan Act. That was approximately $19.6 million. During the course of the last week or so, I've been reviewing, what are accepted uses and prohibited uses of that money. As we all know, around here, there are going to be a lot more needs and wants than there is money available. We want to keep that in mind. I know Nate made a presentation related to stormwater, which is not in dispute as far as being eligible for payment from these funds. And Nate also put together a rough draft of approximately a minimum $10.5 million in stormwater-related projects in the city. As was mentioned, the Allegheny Furnace Mansion Park area is obviously one sector, but there are other sectors in the city that have significant stormwater issues as well, that being Pleasant Valley and Garden Heights. So those are all areas that could be targets for the funds for improved stormwater in those areas. And then also we've received 18 applications at the last count of folks that are interested in being on the advisory board. I don't know if everybody's aware of that, but I just wanted to share that.
I was gonna ask how many we have now. Again, earlier I used the analogy about, digesting the elephant and not being able to do it all in one bite. Omar, I'm wondering, I can't think of anybody that would understand the city's finances and our needs better than you. I'm wondering if we couldn't task you and the mayor, and perhaps, Mayor, if you wanted to maybe pick another person from council or two, to work, you gentlemen working together to come back to us at the June meeting with suggestions as to who should be on that committee, what the responsibilities of that committee would be, and you know, we've already heard, you just mentioned $10 million for stormwater projects. Steve Mcknight mentioned $3 million for housing. That's a third of the money right there, if we decided to move forward with that. You know, maybe that little subcommittee by the June meeting could come up with kind of a shopping list or Christmas list or wish list or list that we could talk about making some priorities, which, you know, I think then we need to talk about, does that committee make recommendations? Are they a sounding board? Or, you know, how does that work with council then on the decision-making process? But I don't know if we could task you with kind of working on that and making a presentation. Mayor, would you be all right with that? I mean, it's just. Sure. So, and I don't know if you want to pick somebody else from council, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I just think having that smaller group and making some recommendations back to the larger group would be a good thing for us to do.
Yeah, I'll work with the mayor and whoever, I'll let it up to you folks to determine who else you want to be on this basically subcommittee or steering committee for the overall committee, the larger committee.
Linda, can we get an updated list of the
Yes, I
folks that
scanned it in, and I don't think I sent it to you, did I? That was today. I scanned it
I don't think we
intentionally
received
to-
anything today.
Okay,
That's
I have
okay.
it in there. I just need to send it.
Because I think last we had 13 a couple weeks ago.
Anything else on this? No? Council open discussion. Councilman Kelly.
Mayor, I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Councilman Butterball.
Just a reminder that Monday, the 31st, Memorial Day, Juniata Parade, and the downtown Altoona Parade will be taking place.
What times?
Yeah.
Oh, I knew somebody was going to ask.
Sorry.
10 and 10:30?
I was trying to look it up real quick. I
Or
believe.
is it 9:30 and 10?
9:30
and
and
10.
10:30.
There
Yeah.
you go.
No, they
Okay.
changed it. It used to
Okay.
be 10. Now it's Juniata is 9:30 and Altoona
That's
is
because a
10:30.
couple of us go from one parade
Yeah.
to the other, and
We're going to
some
double
of
up.
us are older and don't move quite as fast, so.
Councilman Kashotti. Yes, sir. Councilman Ickes.
Nothing at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Media questions. Bill.
Yeah, thank you. Could somebody explain what's the type of license that John Rivnak is going after?
An economic development liquor license.
And what, like briefly, what kind of things does it allow him to do that he can't do now?
I'm sure if you call him up after the meeting, he'd be glad to explain all that to you.
He has certain limitations right now with having the brewer's license. It's not a regular R license that a restaurant would have. It affects his hours of operations and what he can do. And I think, again, to the mayor's point, I think he could give you more specifics as to why he's desirous to do that. And certainly it's his right, because it's an option that's provided for under the law and statute, and it has to be approved by the LCB. But this would give him an opportunity to basically have a regular R license. I know it gets a little confusing because you would maybe look at the establishment and think that he has a regular R license, but he does not.
Would this be a totally new license that would just come into existence?
That would
for
be
the first time?
correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a problem in Pennsylvania because there's only a finite number of licenses that are available.
And since the liquor laws have been relaxed on who can sell beer and wine, the demand for those licenses that are available has been artificially inflated by the entities that are buying them up.
I mean, like supermarkets and convenience stores?
Yep.
What, if anything, is definitively going to happen as a result of the discussion with Steve Mcknight?
Well, I think this is just the start of a series of conversations that's going to continue to take place probably over the next several years if possible. I mean, trying to have serious discussion on updating housing stock in the city is definitely not something that's going to take place over a year's course. So,
But I think Steve's presentation is timely because he highlights those 3 points, some of which require some seed money. We have a land bank, but unless the land bank has some monies to do something, they can't do anything. And you know, we are going to have the opportunity with the American Recovery Plan to have some monies that may be a decision the council makes to say, we want to see, you know, more housing opportunities created. Do we want to spend some of that money and put it towards there and putting it in a revolving loan fund, which apparently it would meet that criteria? You know, so is that something we want to proceed with?
Okay.
I see it as expanding the success we've seen downtown into the rest of the city. And looking at the accomplishments that have been made since the last time he came and gave the original report, and then continuing that success from there.
Okay. Regarding that money, the American Rescue Plan money, I was looking over a little bit of what Omar sent me some federal information about that. It looks to me really limited what you can do. Is housing, it doesn't look to me like housing would be part of that permissible.
there are some housing. I'm not saying this to pat myself in the back, but I've read that document twice now. I would say that there is definitely some avenues where housing can be a play, but as far as to the extent we're able to utilize all of those monies to, I think, do what we're talking about doing, I don't know if we can use it for that.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that, like on those limitations of the American Rescue Plan money at this point? Okay, and then I guess a final question. I know there's flooding in Mansion Park area, but does it go into houses, or is it just street flooding and yard flooding?
You've got any number of basements that receive water. There's a lot of folks that have sump pumps that are running quite a bit.
So there's damage in basements from that?
There has been.
Okay.
I know I have a sump pump.
I have a sump
Jesse
pump.
has a sump
I have a new
pump.
sump pump,
Yeah.
by the way.
Okay. Thank you, that's all.
Tiffany, do you have any questions?
Probably, well,
The rest of the
we've
year.
set the stage that we've tasked the manager and the mayor to come up with maybe making recommendations as to, you know, projects that will be appropriate, what the responsibilities of his advisory committee from the community would be, and also maybe even making recommendations as to the applicants that we've had, who should be on that, the size of the group. So I think tonight's a start. We're going to keep talking about it. Hopefully they'll have some recommendations that we can move forward on at the June 15 meeting. And I think we're going to be talking about this probably every meeting for quite a while. Yeah.
And as far as what we can and can't use it for, have you run into any problems with that?
Omar, I defer to you on that. I mean,
Well, there's some very definitive areas where you can use the money. And there's some other areas where if you're addressing the pandemic or the effects of the pandemic, you can be a little more, a little less restrictive, I guess I should say. So it's really a matter of interpretation, and I think that's what Councilman Nichols was pointing to.
I mean, it's pretty clear as far as, I mean, it seems that broadband usage and stormwater are almost unrestricted in those categories.
Yeah,
For
water,
sure.
water and wastewater, it's pretty clear that it can be used on those issues. You know, but there's mention in there that loans and grants can be given to small businesses, but it doesn't explicitly say that that means that a revolving loan fund can be set up, but you would assume that if grants or if loans can be made to businesses, that those loans have to be paid back, and that loan money would probably come in after the expiration date. So it would be safe to assume that, you know, a revolving loan fund could be used for this. But until Treasury definitively says that, you know, it's just speculation at this point, you know. So I think it's gonna take a little bit longer for Treasury to kind of answer, you know, some of these specific one-off questions, you know, that municipalities across the country are probably all throwing at them right now.
I think the big thing's going to see how much the rules change over time. As different municipalities have different questions, they're going to be updating the rules.
Yeah, I guess the other thing would be that there's nothing that precludes that if this money could be used to replace something currently in a budget, that it would free up money from the budget to do something else with. Would I be correct in saying that?
That's not my preliminary
Okay.
interpretation.
Okay. So this would have to be all new. Okay, all right.
All right, this meeting is adjourned.